Before we introduce Danny, I just want to thank you guys for coming on live. I wanted to celebrate Danny's achievement of 1 year sober, but the story goes way beyond this idea of sobriety. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation this morning. Um, I wrote this book, Mistaken Identity, just about a year ago. It came out. It was April 2023 when I released it. And Danny had been friends for a number of years, and he was one of the first people that went through the book. What I did when the book came out is I gathered a bunch of people together to do what I called an observational trial. The way I built this book, and I wrote this book, but I built this book. I wanted to put together a system that would help people really break free fast of any of the challenges and problems that they were facing in their life, whether it was trying to succeed in your business or your career, or bettering your relationships, or dealing with health problems. We have these kind of three major buckets of our life: our health, our finances, our relationships. I think we all just want peace of mind, financial security. We want to live life out the way we want to live it, and be happy. And a lot of people are coming to me asking me, how I was able to succeed in spite of a very difficult past. If you don't know me, I'm not going to get into my story today, but we are going to give you a free preview of this book a little bit later on. We'll drop a link where you can grab a free preview of the book. And my story that was in the news, that's in the beginning of the book, kind of gives you a bit of background. But I wrote this book because I wanted to give people a process. I discovered a way that was way easier than I ever imagined. It was way quicker than I took. I took a long time. For 30 years, I've been pursuing success, trying to get ahead, trying to do better, trying to lead others to do better, et cetera. And I wanted to show people that it wasn't as complicated as I made it. I thought it was really complicated. I made it complicated. I refuse to believe that it could be easy. I refuse to believe that it could be simple. I refuse to believe that it could be fast. And I also refuse to believe the idea that you could just let it go. Just let it go. Somebody told me, my mentor, just let it go. And I didn't believe that was possible. Anyway, Danny is a testament. He was one of the first people that went through this book. And anybody that buys this book, I always tell you, don't just buy the book. I want you to do the book. We'll talk a little bit about that, but the idea is it is a book that's meant to be used. It's a prescription, literally. It's a better prescription than some of the things my friend Danny tried. I'll tell you that, and he'll share that with you too. So we just wanted to I wanted to celebrate you, Danny, but also share a very compelling story, because the traditional methods that we typically turn to when we're trying to get ahead, or if you're struggling, which a lot of people are, seems more than ever these days, there's a much better way. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of narratives been going on for quite a long time that don't really work. Generally, when people get in trouble, if they're struggling, say with their physical health or their mental health, they generally turn. Maybe they'll confide in somebody, maybe they won't, but they'll generally turn to maybe the doctor, and they'll go see a medical doctor. They may turn to a counselor or to a therapist to try to confide in and resolve their issues. Often people for years have turned to self-help. The self-help industry I think it's now I don't know, a $60 billion industry. It's huge. Books, courses, seminars. Of course, these days people turn to their phones for their self-help hit. Whether it's a YouTube video or some influencer, some guru that they're following, thinking they have the answer. But there's a much better way, and I wanted to share that. But more importantly, I wanted to share Danny's story. So I met Danny. I think you were about 12 years old at the time, 13, 12 years old.
Yep.
I was actually dating Danny's aunt, and that's how I met him. And I just thought, I mean, as soon as I met you, I go, man, this is such a beautiful young boy. What a beautiful young kid you are at the time. And I just took a liking to you right away. And we connected and got along. And it was years later when we reconnected again. And that's kind of, we'll fill in the blanks of that story here a little bit. So why don't we just I want to give context. The title of this is called the End of Addictions. There's a much better way to do this. And so we want to talk about not only celebrate your 1 year, but also there's a bigger conversation here. And so I just put together some questions for you that I want to talk to you about. I think the first thing we need to talk about adverse, they call them ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are usually the cause of a lot of people's addictions and struggles. So just tell us briefly about your childhood, so we have a perspective on what happened to you that would have caused you to develop low self-esteem, inferiority complex, etc. Give us just a quick story on your childhood.
Yeah, so my would have started right basically from birth. My biological father was extremely abusive, and he physically abused my mom actually while she was pregnant, and abused her afterwards. And we actually had to flee the United States to come to Canada to get away from him because of that violent side of him. And then when we came to Canada, my mom being a single mom, she had to go to work and had to leave me with a babysitter. The babysitter's son at 3 years old sexually assaulted and abused me. She then had a male friend who I witnessed physically abuse her, at one time severely, viciously, to the point where she was, extremely bloody, battered. I had to treat, I was actually tending to her wounds for the weeks after that abuse. And he abused me as well. And then he actually went on and raped 3 women and killed one of them and went to prison here in Kitchener. So, and then, my mother remarried, who's someone who adopted me now. My parents and I have a great relationship now. They've been through a lot in their lives, but they had a lot of adverse childhood experiences as well. And those experiences that I believe are passed down from, generation to generation, are like a disease. And it was, passed on to me. The shame, the control, don't speak unless you're spoken to, just all the stuff that a lot of people have experienced with that type of upbringing. So yeah, that's really it in a nutshell. And that kind of turned me into a kid who was very confused and scared, often,
Yeah.
and violent, and a violent kid as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing I discovered, took me way too long to discover it, and you way too long as well. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but if you want to free yourself, it's a lot better to deal with the root cause rather than mask or band-aid the effects or the symptoms. So the root cause for most people, I call it the 60% dilemma. 60% of adults, 60% of people watching right now, whether you're live with us or watching the replay, have been through some form of these adverse childhood experiences. That's the root cause of your problems. Everybody tends to deal with masking, band-aiding the effects. So tell us about some of the effects that you had to struggle with from this root cause, which was the abuse. So as you got into your teen and young adult years, tell us what that was like. What were you suffering from and dealing with? You had diagnoses, you had pills, you had all kinds of things you went through over a period of time.
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on something quickly, and you're right. People try to mask it, and also they try to hide it because of the shame, right? It's no one wants, and the parents and everyone doesn't want anyone to know because they don't want to feel like they were a bad parent. So then we are shamed even more by hiding this, and then it just digs down deep into us, and then these effects happen from the cause. And for me, it started to turn into, I was started with nightmares at a young age. I'd have such bad nightmares that I'd rock my bed back and forth, where I'd be on my hands and like my elbows and knees, that it would go up to the door, and my parents wouldn't be able to get into the bedroom because the bed was blocking the door. And then I was having panic attacks at a very young age, anxiety, which isn't normal. And then I had certain things that started to manifest in my body, physically. Tourette syndrome. I had really, really bad tics. I had ADHD. Um, which that's a whole other story, but I really do believe happened from the adverse experiences. and childhood anxiety, really angry, really violent at a young age, and really not understanding why, because a lot of this stuff happened to me at such a young age. I didn't even know what was going on, and as a child, no one's there to tell you, well, hey, this is happening because of the cause. And then that turned into a lot of medication. From my neurologist had me on haloperidol, risperidone. I mean, I have so many medications I can't even keep up. Prozac, and this is at like 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, and so I was on all that medication until I was about 15 years old, and so I was really set up to be an addict because
Yeah.
of everything that happened, and also on top of that, they were trying to give me drugs to mask the cause, which was not physical; it was emotional. And yeah, so and then I carried around that shame, confusion, shame, um, paranoia, and so, but they just kept masking that with more and more drug. Here's some more drugs. Here's a different drug for you to try now that should work. And then here's another drug to counteract that one drug that you're taking to make that drug not so bad.
Yeah. Do you sorry to interrupt, so a very prevalent thing today, I think more so than ever it seems, there's a real perpetuation of this victim mentality. So you were a victim. I mean, I was a victim. We were both victims of these adverse experiences, abuse, and witnessing it as well, right? But when you're a victim, beyond the victimization, so into your later years, you also become a villain. If you're a victim, and folks, you got to get it straight. If you live with this victim mentality, you also have to be the villain. And if you have an inferiority complex, then you act superior to cover it up. So do you recall a couple situations or one or two situations where you became the villain?
Well, there were many, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'll only say a few. Very violent, and being completely transparent here, very violent, fighting at school all the time, violent towards in my relationships. I mean, not aggressively, beating beating my girlfriends or anything, but violent, punching holes in the walls at a young age. And then I was in and out of the system, the criminal system at a young age in high school, fighting all the time at high school. And the villain, yeah, in my relationships, womenizing, a lot of this turned into this shame turned into, like you said, you become the villain, and because that's just what ends up happening. And luckily, I never turned into anyone who sexually abused, and I'm always grateful for that. I never had those tendencies, but I know there was a real issue with my sexuality because of this. I was very confused at a young age, and I think I was having sexual relationships at a way too young of an age that I think that happened. Well, I know that happened from that.
Yeah.
I started becoming the villain because I became an addict. I was using drugs at 14 years old, drinking at 14 years old. Many stories. I broke a lot of. There was a lot of broken relationships, friendships, abuse towards others. Just there's many things that happened that I was the villain, which then amplified my shame, because now I'm bad. I already felt I was bad. Now I'm doing bad things.
Right.
And to the core, I'm a horrible person, and I lived with that my entire life.
Yeah.
Until
I just, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, so at 12, when I met Danny, I didn't see any of this. All this was already perpetuating at that age, at an earlier. I didn't see any of it with it. I just saw this beautiful young kid, sweet boy, good sense of humor, real kind energy. You should have turned out a hell of a lot worse,
True.
Anybody that knows you, that meets you, that's ever heard the story would be probably very surprised by this. And so, I don't think it's luck, but I mean, when I met you, I just saw the truth in you. What I saw, I could just see you for, who you really were, I think. But we of course mask these things and cover these things up. So let's talk about the so-called system, and methods that people turn to. I mentioned that people turn to medical doctors, counseling, therapy, all these different methods. And it seems to perpetuate a victim mentality and keep you stuck in a prison. So talk to us a little bit about what are some of the, we started to realize you had to do something about all this. You've tried a lot.
Yeah.
You sent me a picture of some affirmations you had written years and years ago. But just share, if you kind of gave us a checklist, I did this, give us a checklist of all the things you tried in order to
Yeah.
fix your.
Well, yeah, I mean, in high school, it was, my mom, really always had my back, even though, there were some hard times with her and I. She was really trying to do everything she could. And a lot of that was sending me to, neurologists or, psychologists, psychiatrists. So there was a medication that came there from that, anger management. So the system starts at that point, right? You start going through the system of what the government is implemented for people to get better. And then there's, therapy. I started therapy in my 20s. There was some help there. And then I started doing, like Reiki, and I started, getting really spiritual. And I watched The Secret when I was like 26 or whatever. I was young. It just had come out. I went to the Hoffman program. I went to a lot of these retreats, and I went to a detox in Montreal called Narcanon. I mean, there's just a long list of things that I was trying to do. And we had my family and I, my mom and I, myself, we had great intentions at that time. But nothing really worked. There was little incremental changes. And then I really got into the self-help, because it really is alluring, because, hey, I can help myself. So I bought every book imaginable. I had a shelf full of every book. I read them all. Some of them I didn't read. Some of them I did the work. Louise Hay, who I do really like, but everything you can imagine. But it was always like, everything is based around something is wrong with you and you need to fix yourself. And maybe not all these books are based on that, but the whole entire idea of self-help is that I need help and I need to fix myself. I'm the only one who can do it. And I gotta do it. And then it becomes a perpetuated issue where we're looking for help from just from a book or a bunch of books, or not really making any long-lasting changes. And like I sent you some affirmations that I made like 10 years ago. It was a long page, and just all the affirmations, and they were great. But I would read them, and then I was just like, toss it, screw this, it's not working.
Right.
But then the other day I picked them up and I was reading them, and it just felt so good. It felt like I felt it to my core. Like, yeah, these things I can accomplish them, and a lot of them I have. But yeah, that happened because of some changes that needed to happen, which I'm sure we'll talk about more. Needed to happen in me inside.
So let's talk about the sobriety. Let's kind of pivot to that, because we did want to celebrate you. I know you're taking the day to celebrate yourself. We were talking. We first got the idea to do this live. I think you were on day 351. I think you showed me your phone, and we started laughing a little bit. I go, "Isn't it amazing how easy this was for you to do this?" Now, it was hard at first. I want to talk about why the first couple of months were hard, but also it became easy. And we were laughing, like, you didn't go to AA, you didn't need a sponsor, you didn't need this, you didn't need that. I were joking we should just go around the country and talk to all the AA meetings and sort these guys out.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about when you quit a year ago. It was hard at first. I remember we were talking. So you and I started working together a few years back and stuff. And I remember you talking a lot about the drinking. And I told you, I said, just keep drinking. You go, what? I go, yeah, just keep drinking. And I was talking about how self-image works. I said, just start to see yourself as the sort of person you want to be.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't include drinking, then just see yourself as that person, and you will start to change. Your self-image will start to change your mind, and your behaviors will change. But so it's been a year today, right?
Today's a year, yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
It's funny because, as I'm saying, I feel it's a wonderful accomplishment, but in some respects, I'm going, it's not that big a deal. I mean, it is a big deal, but it's not that big a deal.
It was.
It was, yeah, it was, yeah. So, talk to this idea. I mean, people that have problems with any addiction, alcohol, drugs, whatever. Um, Tell us first about. It was hard at first, so tell us the beginning was like. But what changed it, and also talk about why you think a lot of these methods that are out there to support people, i.e., in the case of drinking, why do you think, in your opinion, that they don't work? In this idea that I love what you put it. It feels like people go from one person to another. So talk about first about what it was like starting out to end the drinking and become sober, and then something shifted, and then why do you think people, kind of
Yeah.
hop goes into prison?
So, well, initially, I especially like I wasn't always a daily alcoholic. I used to drink on the weekends, and I did drugs, but I quit doing drugs in my 30s. But then in this, I'm not going to blame it on the pandemic, because even before the shutdown, I was a daily alcoholic. I was still going to work most of the time, and I was still competent to a certain level. But then through the pandemic, it got really bad. And then that opened up, and there's no more excuses. And then I started working with you, and it really came to me where I said, you know what, these changes aren't happening that I want to make in my life, in my business, in my relationships, because I'm still drinking. But I had this idea in my head that, oh no, I can drink. I know people who drink and they're fine. So and at the time I was in a relationship, and it was negatively impacting our relationship, and it was a spark for me to stop. I got to stop. I got to be a better man. I got to be better in my business. But I really struggled for the first 2 months with sheer willpower. I did it. I continued to not drink, but like you said, I was in a prison. So first, you wanted me to talk about that. What was the second thing that you mentioned?
Well, just, I mean, talk about when did the struggle end for you? Because it's been two of
Right.
12 months. In the beginning, it was hard. People
Yeah.
struggle all the way through. And so talk a little bit about what changed, because really what changed for you is you just started to see yourself
Yeah.
differently, through getting you to see, why
Right.
you felt the way you felt about yourself, what we call your mistaken identity. And then talk about how people just continue to, because of mistaken identity, keep hopping from one prison to another, and the
Yeah.
system
Which
stuck
is
too.
really the important part. But yeah, so basically, well, I started doing your 45-day program, and I'd read your book already. I did some exercises. I wasn't too
Some, you
committed.
didn't do them all.
Well, the first time when I got the pre-book, right? But when I got the actual program, I did them all. I was very religious. I would go to there's a park here in Waterloo called Waterloo Park. I would
Yeah.
go there every morning, and I made an effort for half an hour every morning that I would do it. And I think that's a big part of when we're trying to make any major changes, is if it's about repetition and having people there that have the right information, like yourself, to help us. And I had you there, talking to you a lot about these things and these wins that I was having. And there was a particular chapter in mistaken identity called, it's the poison chapter, right? It's called
Yeah,
poison, is it?
poison. Yeah, poison.
Yeah. And that's where it really hit me. And it's funny because I've read a lot of different things in the past about this. We all know that, well, not all of us, but I think it's becoming much more common now that people know that we've been fed these beliefs from our childhood that might not be serving us. But the way that you put it, it's like you've been given poison. And when I recognized that I was given a poison that actually had a cure, that I don't have to continue to walk around with that poison I was given. And that poison I was given by people who probably didn't mean to do it, because they were given the poison. And there was a way to let that go. And if I let that poison go, I recognize that it was not my fault that any of this happened. And it doesn't make me, it is not a definition of who I am. What happened to me is merely experience. They're merely experiences, not a definition of who I am as a person. The mistakes that I made, the mistakes that were made against me, people were at fault, but no one's to blame. They didn't know any better, and if they did, they probably wouldn't do it. as like myself.
Yeah.
So that really freed me but I knew these things before, but something just hit. And it was the daily of doing it and having someone there. It should help because I think it's important to have someone there to guide you through it. Yeah. And then I think what the mistake with the system is that the system has you believe, mental health system and the meeting systems, all that, they make you believe that you have a disease and that it's incurable. And that's not very freeing, in my opinion. And that's a prison in itself. So if we're going to be in an addictive prison of alcohol or drugs, and then go into another prison where we believe that there's something severely wrong with us, then that's going to be how we live the rest of our lives. I made a joke to you before. I said, I'd rather go back and be a drunk and actually have some fun than live in that prison. Now that's a joke. Obviously, I don't want to do that. But then you can jump addiction. The substances or what you're doing is just merely an effect of the addiction. The addiction mentality, or what we have that's making us kind of be addicted. It can be drugs, alcohol, sex, womanizing, steroids, plastic surgery, shopping. I mean, the list goes on and on. And if we don't heal ourselves and our self-image, we will go from one prison to another. And I was in the beginning. Okay, so I stopped drinking, but then I was going to food but I didn't go to, some other things, but I was going to and doing some shopping, or then, being addicted to depression or coping. So coping, it can happen in many different ways. But it wasn't until I freed myself of that past image of myself that I became addiction free, which I am addiction free. I can say now. Last night, did I have a couple too many pieces of chocolate? Yeah, but that's not an addiction. I just had a couple pieces of chocolate. But I have no addictions anymore. I'm not addicted to depression. I'm not addicted to anxiety. I'm not addicted to coping in any way. When things come to me, and I've like, hey, a year's sobriety doesn't mean everything's going to be easy. It's been tough. I've had to rebuild my business. It's been up and down. I've gone through a breakup, with a significant breakup. It's been really tough, where I could have jumped back into coping with all of these things, but I didn't, because I know that there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
I now know that I'm a good man. And yes, I made mistakes, but that's okay. They're a thing of the past. And so I don't have to go to coping to get through it, because I know I have me.
Yeah.
I have me to go to.
It's almost like I have this picture of a circular prison, imagine a prison is circular and there's cells on the outside and on the inside. And this whole thing is really circular. So in your case, for example, like many cases, so you have these adverse experiences as a kid, very, very common that they're kept hidden. I mean, the law keeps it hidden. If you're under 16, they so-called protect your identity. Because of society and things like that, the parents, the family. So we keep these secrets. Secrets keep you sick, not just the child, but also the adult, if they're carrying secrets around. And so the result of that, the effect from the original cause, is all these problems with our emotional well-being, which then, of course, transpire and perpetuate in our physical world, whether it's our relationships, our health, et cetera. And when you don't have these, listen, you either grow up confident or you don't, okay? If you're insecure, if you have a lot of self-doubt, if you have an inferiority complex, low self-esteem, chances are you went through something adverse. A lot of people have it blocked out, don't remember it, or it's been blocked out purposely by family, adults, et cetera, to keep the secrets safe. But that fosters these emotional feelings. And then when you feel that way, it shows up in your physical state. And then, of course, you turn to the doctors, and the doctors diagnose you, and they give you these labels, and they give you these pills, and all in an effort to help you. And there's all these things you mentioned, the different things you tried, but it's really just coping, right? You're basically just trying to cope with how you feel. And sometimes the relief lasts a while. It's often temporary, but you basically just go from one prison to another. And what we've got to get, there's a chapter about a book, and it's bold for me to say, but I think I found the cure. Now, it's not my cure. It is the cure. And you got to get to the root cause of what it is that causes you to feel the way you feel, see yourself the way you see yourself, and do it as you do, and harm yourself and others. And then, of course, you do that, you put yourself back in prison. So before we go here, I mean, let's wrap up and talk about where you are now, because as you said, like, and I often forget about it, you had a difficult, I've just focused on the celebration thing. I go, man, oh man, this is good. But I do recall the last year, and lots of conversations. You did have a very difficult year, which most people, even if they hadn't gone through what you'd gone through, right, as a young person, and even if you had not been, addicted to alcohol or drugs, whatever, many people would turn to the things that you've been living with for a long, long time to deal with what you went through this year. So how is that? How is it that you can just quit like that, and in spite of all the difficulties and the struggles, get yourself to a point now where you are not an addict. You're not going to stand up and go, I'm an alcoholic. I mean, you're free of all of that.
Yeah.
How is that? And tell us where you are now. What's it like for you now? And why are you free of all of this?
Like I said to you one time, I dropped 200 pounds of shame. And that's why I'm free, right? I no longer have shame. And I stand up for myself. I say what I feel that I believe without caring what other people think. Like today, normally I would never have been able to come on here and tell my story because I would be worried what people would think, but I don't care anymore. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. I know I'm a good person. That's not egotistical. That's not like I don't care what anyone thinks, because I do. I'm still a kind person. But that's very freeing, losing all of that shame. So there's no reason for me to cope with those things. And I think like we talked about, the system will have you want to continue to tell yourself that you're an addict and that you have a disease and you can't be helped without help. And I don't need that. And I do believe that other people don't need that. Like you said, once you get to the core of why these things are happening and you drop all of the shame and you're free to be you, and no one stands in your way, no one controls you anymore, then you're free. And then, because I stand up now and I say, I'm not an addict, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not violent. I don't claim to be anything like that. I'm free. And that's how I'm going to live the rest of my life, free. And I believe other people can do it too. And I know, because if I can, you can do it, because I struggled, man. I was a drug addict at 14 years old. I was doing drugs. I was doing chemical drugs, not just smoking pot. I was an alcoholic. And it's not just sheer willpower, because willpower does not get you through it. You'll end up back to it over and over and over again. And I'm free of all addiction now, and not just substances. I'm free from having to search for a relationship. I don't need to search for that. A lot of people are out there, they're searching for love to make them happy, when that's not going to make them happy. Love will come to you when you're free and ready. And I don't search for it. And I did in the past. I don't use anything to cope, and I'm free. And that's the way that it should be. I don't think anyone should let anyone tell them that they have a disease and that it's incurable, especially one that comes from the mind.
Yeah. Especially when it comes from the mind.
Mhm.
Well, I'd love to talk to you all day long. There's so much in this story. I'd certainly encourage you to reach out to Danny and connect with him. And I think what I discovered anyway, and I think you discovered too, is that we end up with this mistaken identity. We have the wrong opinion of ourselves, the feelings towards ourselves, and it's all because of our experiences when we were young. Even if they're not adverse, you didn't have to go through what Danny and I went through. You could have grown up in a lovely family with lovely, loving parents. They're still together and married and all that stuff, and you're still dealing with these coping mechanisms and these problems. And we generally do in a tough time, but I wanted to ask you, how you were feeling about yourself when we were trying all these methods and they weren't working. We generally tend to turn on ourselves, and the cure really is to really get to the root cause of all these problems. Now, you don't have to go dredging up the past and all that. You can if you like, but you should assemble some facts. And when you have the truth about who you are, then it's a lot easier to drop these negative feelings and associations that you have naturally watching, like, listening to you today. And again, thinking about, I remember the kitchen table in the basement on Byron Avenue in Kitchener, Ontario, where I first met you. And I still see you that way. And people listening to you will see this beautiful side to you. And so I think people, they get stuck in an emotional prison. They got arrested. It was a case of mistaken identity. And if you can free yourself by seeing your story and seeing yourself differently, like get to the truth of who you really are and the truth of why you feel the way you feel, you can free yourself from that, and you get rid of this dis-ease. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they go, I have a disease. I go, no, you don't. You might be at dis-ease, but it doesn't mean you have a disease, but they're locked into a narrative too. So listen, I wanted to come on and celebrate you, but I think beyond the celebration, there's a lot of important elements in your story, and I'm on a mission, and I know Danny helps me too and helps others. We're just on a mission to try to get people to get to the truth. And there's a much easier way. The current methods and narrative, they're supportive, they're complementary, but they ultimately, for the most part, keep a lot of people stuck. And I don't want to see people stuck when they don't need to. So any closing remarks you want to leave with people before we wrap up?
Well, and I would say that I would say the same thing, that these therapies and things, they do have their place. But I will say this: we are what we believe that we are. And you hear these quotes all the time. So if we believe that we are diseased, then we are diseased. If we believe that we can't cure ourselves, then we won't. So
yeah. Yeah. And it's easy to get locked into these narratives. So I think you've got a better narrative now that you're following and listening to, and your own narrative as well, which is freeing. It's powerful. It's authentic. It's you. So I appreciate you coming on. We're going to drop a link to a free preview for the book. If you haven't got my book yet, get the free preview. It's got my story and then an introduction to this concept of mistaken identity. And then a couple of chapters. You can kind of get a sense of what this is all about. I wanted to create a method and a prescription. It literally is a prescription. Danny went to the park each day, read a chapter, did the exercise. It's not very long. Each chapter is like 3 or 4 minutes long. And then I ask you a couple of questions, and it's a prescription. Like literally, if you want to take any pills, this is a better pill to take. It actually gets to the cure. So I encourage you to grab the free download if you haven't got it, and connect with Danny as well, and drop some comments in if you're watching the replay. We'd love to hear your perspective, and we might need to correct your perspective if you're off track. But we're just here to help you, and I want to thank you, Danny, for coming on, and it's going to be a wonderful year.
Thank you for having me. It is. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks everybody. Take care.